Okay, so we spoke about how to make the movie. Now we need to talk about how to sell it.
Okay, that's true because selling it is in some ways more important than making it. Like in any business, if you can't sell what you make, then you're going to be in trouble because you're not going to make any money and then you're not going to be able to make another movie. So, selling it in the film business called distribution. And there's two major components, which is distribution and marketing. So, not only do you have to sell the movie, you're not actually going to sell it. I'm going to explain in a second. But you also have to create awareness, which is marketing. So there are four major components to what we call the distribution process. And when I say you're not really selling it, you're licensing it.
Okay.
And you're basically giving people, your audience, whether that be a broadcaster, a streaming service, or a consumer, the right to watch your movie for a certain period of time, but they don't own it. So this is a legal thing. So distribution is basically granting a license to somebody to watch as opposed to giving them the ownership and title. So when we use the term sell in the film business, we're basically referring to the word license. Now, once in a while, you actually sell. So the ownership of a movie is called the copyright. So somebody who has the copyright to, and that's the same with a book or a piece of art or whatever. Basically, when you own it, you own the copyright to it. It's a little bit more complicated
It's
than
like
that, but
having the title.
that's the title.
Okay.
That's like the title of a property, exactly. So that's who owns it, right? So every once in a while, somebody will actually make you a gigantic offer to say, hey, we want you to transfer the title of this property, the property being the film, to us. That would be a sale. All right. Doesn't happen a lot. Unless they're big companies or making big offers, that type of thing. But in the independent film world, generally that's not going to happen. They're not going to buy your title from you. So what you're going to do is you're going to license it, kind of like you own the building and you're going to lease out the apartments. So they can use your building, but you still own it.
Okay.
All right. So me, the copyright owner, the artist who made the movie, I still own it. Now I'm going to give the long-term lease maybe to, say, Netflix. And I'm going to say, you can have the right to my movie for the next 5 years exclusively, and then you can let your customers watch it. So that's called a license. And that's basically what distribution is finding people to license it. Now, in some cases, in a lot of cases now, we're going to go direct to the consumer, meaning we're going to say to viewers, audience out there, would you like to watch our movie through a certain platform or through our own platform? And all we're doing to them is it's like renting an apartment to a tenant. We're saying, do you want to, or maybe that would be the case of, say, a VRBO or, some type of very short-term thing. So you're saying, do you want to use our apartment for a weekend?
Uh-huh.
And that would be a short-term, one-off lease, right? Or as opposed to Netflix, do you want to use our apartment for the next 5 years? That's a long-term lease. So
Okay.
relative to real estate, that's what it is. But you're not selling title, you're just granting the use of it.
Okay.
So that's what distribution is. All right. So there are four major components to distribution. And this is the foundation of pretty well any business, but certainly the film business. All right. So number one is you need to identify who your audience is. Like you need to know who you're selling to.
Well, this is something that we should have done, in the development of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We should do that beforehand. I can't remember. I think we spoke about that a little bit. But if you want to be successful with your movie, your property, you got to make sure that there's a market for it. So it would be, similar to you building a building, let's say, in a certain place and knowing that there, or even a retail outlet,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that there's customers available to actually shop in that outlet. If you're going to spend a ton of money to put a strip mall up, you want to make sure that there's a big market available who will actually come and shop in those stores. Your tenants are all going to go broke.
Right.
So you wouldn't build a strip mall in a place where there's no potential customers, or you wouldn't build an apartment building where there's no potential tenants. So it's the same with the movie if you want to be successful. You need to know that there's going to be a potential audience who is going to be interested to watch your movie. And it's better to identify that before you make your movie, because if you can't identify it before you make your movie, then maybe you shouldn't make that movie.
Right.
Could be that, like, it's same thing. Like, if you don't know that there are people who are going to come to your strip mall, it would not be a good financial bet to build that strip mall in that place.
Well, people would say, "What are you doing?"
And they would be right.
Yeah.
Would be like, "Hey, did you not do your homework? You're building this beautiful strip mall, but nobody lives within 100 miles of this thing, and nobody's driving it. Go shop it. Those tenants aren't going to rent your space because nobody's there to shop." Same with a movie. Basically, you have to say, do I have a core audience who is going to be interested in watching that movie and will engage and actually, enjoy it? And if you can't say yes to that, then don't make that movie, because there's no audience for it.
Right.
And that may sound obvious to filmmakers. It might be like, well, of course people are going to watch my movie. I mean, I'm making a movie that's super engaging and super interesting, and I like it. That's why I'm making it. So what filmmakers often do, they make this mistake. It's very self-indulgent, indie filmmakers. They really think that if they like the movie, then their audience will like the movie. And that is not necessarily true. It's possible that your audience, maybe a lot of filmmakers make sort of quasi biopics, meaning they tell stories about what happened to them in their lives. They change the characters a little bit in the settings and everything like that. But you'll see that's a big theme in indie filmmaking is, I went through this bullying stage of my life, or I went through this in my life, or whatever, and I want to depict it and share this with the world and help make the world better. So I'm going to tell a story like this. And albeit they can be good stories, but maybe not that engaging to audiences, engaging to you and, your close family or whatever, but not really overly engaging to outside audiences.
Mm-hmm.
So you really need to really think really hard about who your core audience is. And I say you should do that before you make your movie. But now we're in the distribution phase. So you've made your movie. Now you've got to dissect it and say, okay, who does this movie play to? Like, who really, really, really is going to enjoy this movie, wants to watch it, and will hopefully pay to watch it? And that's not easy. Figuring out that is in some ways harder than making your movie. I mean, you have to do a lot of market research. You have to be honest. You have to really dissect your movie and understand who what I call your core audience is. So this is step one is identify your audience, okay? But a lot of filmmakers say to me, my audience is everybody. Like, this film is a general film and it'll play to everybody. And I say, hopefully that's the case. That would be great. But everybody's a big audience. Like, that's a really big audience, the everybody audience. And as an indie filmmaker, you have limited marketing resources, and chances are you're not going to have enough money or time or resources to connect with everybody, because it's just everybody's too big. So you have to try to connect with a smaller group of people, what we call our core niche audience. And the other way I say it is, if you want to win a war, don't win it in one battle. Win a small battle, then win another battle, then win another battle, because you don't have a gigantic army as an indie filmmaker. As a studio, you do. You've got tons of resources and money and all this kind of stuff. But as an indie filmmaker, you have to go slow. You have to win one battle at a time. And that battle is try to get 1,000 or 2, 3, 4,000 people to watch your movie. Don't try to get 200,000 or 300,000 or 2 or 3 million out of the gate the first time. It's great if you can, but chances are you won't be able to. So your core audience is go to the people who you think will really, really, really want to see that movie. All right. Because those are the ones who will, if they see it and enjoy it, will become ambassadors for you. They'll be, all of a sudden, they will each say, hey, I watched this movie, and they'll tell 10 other people that they watched it and they enjoyed it. And then hopefully 10 other people will watch it, and they'll each tell 10 other people, and you get word of mouth. So identifying your core audience is pretty tricky. And like I say, if you really should do this before you make your movie, because if you can't do it before, then afterwards, it's not magically going to happen. It's not like, oh, I made a movie, then magically an audience gets identified. It's the same exercise whether you do it before or after. But when you do it afterwards and you can't do it, like you can't identify the audience, it's too late. It's over. You're out of business. So if you do it before and you can't identify the audience, at least you have a chance to say, hey, maybe I shouldn't make the movie. That's why it's important to do that. Okay, so step one, know who you're selling your movie to. No different than in real estate. Know that there is a potential group of tenants who might want to rent your apartment building that you're building or your strip mall that you're building. Same type of thing. Just know who those potential people are. Very, very important. Basic marketing 101 in any business. Like if you're going to make a product, if you can open a restaurant, know that you're doing it in a neighborhood where potentially there are people who go to restaurants and hopefully would enjoy that kind of food.
Right.
Just basic marketing. But you'd be surprised how many indie filmmakers do not think about that. And then after the fact, it's kind of too late because they haven't thought about it. It's hard to address that. So I'll give you an example of all of my movies I do this for, but I'll just use one of them. Okay. So I've made 2 gymnastics movies. So the first one is called Full Out. And when I was making that movie, I like the story. I found the story. But the reason I found that story is because I went looking for a story like that, because gymnastics is only popular in an Olympic year. Women's gymnastics.
Right.
Okay. For gymnasts, it's popular all the time. But for the general public, if you notice, women's gymnastics gets absolutely no coverage unless it's Olympic year.
Right.
And during an Olympic year, everybody wants to see women's gymnastics. It's really fun, exciting, engaging, right? So in 2014, in anticipation of the 2016 Olympics, I said, hey, a women's gymnastics movie could be really engaging. It hasn't been done, a lot. So, and I found this great story of this gymnast, and I said, hey, this could be really, really engaging to audiences in 2016. And that's when I pitched it to Netflix, the end of 2014, saying, hey, during the Olympics, people are going to be watching a lot of women's gymnastics, and they're going to be interested at that time. If I make this movie now, you could launch it just before the Olympics and get a lot of viewing audience.
Before you made the movie, you went and approached them.
Before I even chose the script, before I chose the content, I said, wouldn't it be a smart idea to do a women's gymnastics movie in an Olympic year, like have it ready in an Olympic year, because that is meaningful. Kind of like,
But because you wanted to see if the audience was there first?
I wanted to know they're there. Yeah. And I know they're going to be there. Now, that's step one. Step two is, that's the general audience. Like the general viewing audience will actually accept a women's gymnastics movie during an Olympic year. People who never watch gymnastics will actually be engaged by women's gymnastics during the Olympics. Mm-hmm. Okay. But outside of the Olympics, my core audience is not that. That's the general audience. My core audience is basically 12-year-old girls who are members of gymnastics clubs and do it all the time, right. Of which there are, 2.5 to 3 million across the United States, and also potentially who do hip hop dance, because there was a big hip hop dance component in that movie.
Okay.
So I know at the very least, even if the gymnastics, like the Olympic crowd doesn't engage, that core gymnast crowd will.
Okay.
That the worst case scenario is that I can go to those gymnasts, and I say 12-year-old girls, it's somewhere between 8 and 16 or whatever, but I just hone in on 12 because that's what we do for core audience. I say the very worst case scenario would be those girls are going to want to watch this movie. It's a female empowerment movie about a female gymnast who overcomes adversity. And so it really speaks to female gymnasts more than male gymnasts. Now, male gymnasts will watch it too because they're interested. But at the very least, I can rely on pretty well. I'm going to assume that 95% of female gymnasts who are 12 years old, who are engaged in the sport, will want to see this kind of movie because this is who they are. This is what speaks to them. This is the core audience.
Right.
So I have a marketing, so I can focus on that and create that movie. And if I couldn't say that before I made the movie, I wouldn't have made that movie. I mean, I like the story. I think it was fun to make the movie and everything like that. But the major reason I made the movie is because I felt that there was a built-in core audience for it, and I wanted to be successful with that movie.
Do you feel that because you dive in deep on that core audience, that it can appeal to the general public as well, or just them.
Yes, no, it absolutely will appeal to the general public because it's an inspirational sports movie. It's a comeback movie, right? So, but remember I said, let's win one battle at a time. So the first battle is get those gymnasts engaged.
Right.
Okay. Because they're the easiest to go after. And when I get to step 2, you'll see what I mean. That's step 1 is finding the audience, right? So I know that I can rely on them. And if I can't, shame on me. Like it would be amazing to me that gymnasts would not want to watch a gymnastic movie, an inspirational gymnastics movie. Now,
Right.
beyond that, then I'm sure their family and their friends and other people who, just love inspirational sports movies, the general audience will want to see the movie. And I'm hoping that that's the case. But my first attack and my first battle is win the gymnasts because they're going to be the low-hanging fruit, the easiest ones to get to, and hopefully the most engaged, right?
And then start the referral process.
And they start to talk to other people and word of mouth. But then the second battle would be go a little bit wider, go to more of a general audience, maybe go to a family audience who wants to watch a inspirational sports movie. My favorite sports movie is Rudy, as we talked about, and Rudy the football movie. And so that is a football movie, and obviously football players, all college and high school football players would engage in that movie, right? As they should, if they're aspirational for football, right? But me, I didn't play high school football or anything, and I like football, but what I like is a good inspirational sports movie. So I'm sort of the next level. I'm the who wants to see a great comeback, heartfelt, inspirational sports movie. I do. So I'm level 2 in that, which is in my case also level 2 would be anybody who wants to see a nice inspirational sports movie. But that's the second battle, and then you just keep building and building from that. But if all else,
it's kind of like tiers.
Yeah, it's tiers, and that's how you do it. Now, when you're a studio with a big, huge film, you just grab the whole audience all at one time. You don't have to go tiers. You're going to go television advertising, go very wide, huge social media campaign, huge billboards, and all this other print. You're just going to throw everything at one battle. You're going to win the war in one battle. And you're just going to get everybody's attention at one time. Now, you'll do some other cleanup stuff afterwards. You do little things here and there. But
how did they get to that point? I feel like they got, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like they got to that point by being niche originally. And then it grew and grew and grew and became.
You're talking the studios?
Yeah.
Who knows? Like when they
like
first
Marvel movies, though.
Marvel moved. No,
You know.
Marvel developed an audience through comic books. I mean,
Right.
So they had the comic book audience. So Marvel, when they first launched the movie, said, "Hey, we can rely on the people who read our comic books. That's why we're going to make these movies. Because at the
Right,
very worst
right.
case scenario is there are 20 million people who read our comic books on a regular basis, and we're going to assume they're going to want to watch a movie." And obviously, that they were right about that, and that's an easy one. Like, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's not a no-brainer, but it makes a heck of a lot of sense. You've developed an audience over decades and decades and decades of comic book readers. Now you're going to give them this. And they had the cartoons, the animated cartoon, like say Spider-Man. I mean, Spider-Man didn't started as a comic book. Then it went to an animated series, many animated series for young kids. I mean, I watched it when I was a kid. Spider-Man, Spider-Man. I'm dating myself. Does whatever a spider can, spins a web any size, catches crooks. Okay, I mean that when you grew up, I grew up with that, right? And it was a 2D crappy animation series. Back then it was really cool, but today, that wouldn't fly. But it engaged me. So the minute a live action Spider-Man, big budget live action Spider-Man movie came out, I wanted to see it because I grew up with that character, and and same with Batman and all these other characters. So they had that built-in core audience, and that was smart for them to go after it. Then they went, so step 1 was they knew they had that, but they went bigger right away. They said, hey, even if people don't like Spider-Man or didn't know about Spider-Man, wasn't engaged either through the comic books or the animated series or whatever, we're going to give a big, huge, action-packed special effects action hero movie. And when you have the resources they do, you can go wide across the board in terms of advertising and just blanket the whole world and say, hey, this is going to be the big epic movie of the summer. And even though you're not a, say, superhero fan, you're going to love this movie. It's got a relationship with and heart and action and villains, and it's just going to be a fun movie to watch, a fun epic movie. So they go huge. Like they don't say, okay, only Spider-Man fans, you watch this. They already have those people. They go, Spider-Man fans and everybody else come to the movie theaters and watch this movie. Because when you're doing a big theatrical release like what they did in the movie theaters, you just want to go big out of the gate. But indie films don't do that. They generally don't have big theatrical releases, so they have to go slower and they have to build. They have to do like the steps as you talked about, not just one big. I mean, basically, to use war terms, because I'm talking about win a battle. I mean, an indie film will go and fight like a little battle in, some remote forest somewhere. And a big epic studio film, they're just going to drop 10 nuclear bombs on the world and just get everybody's attention at the same time.
Okay.
Because they have the resources to do it.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the audience. That's finding your audience. It's super important to do it, because if you don't do it beforehand, you're not going to do it afterwards. Hopefully you know who your audience is, and that's who you're making your movie for.
And that's step one.
That is step one in distribution and marketing.